Hello, welcome to the July 6th, 2021 Club Cubase live stream. We'll get started in just a couple of minutes. My name is Greg Undo, and I'll be the host for the live stream. I'm going to do a quick audio test on my end, so bear with me just for a second. Make sure everything's coming through. All right, so everything sounds like it's coming through fine. So once again, my name is Greg Undo. I'll be the host for the live stream today. And how a live stream works is you can submit questions in advance to clubcubase@steinberg.de, or you could simply ask your question in the chat field. So we'll try to get through all the questions in chronological order as we can. So, when asking questions, if you could indicate which version of Cubase you're running and what operating system. So it could be Cubase Elements 10.5 on Windows 10, or Cubase Pro 11 on Mac Big Sur, whatever. That information will be helpful. So we'll try to go through as many questions as we can chronologically today. So, and if you are attending the live stream and you're watching it live, please feel free to introduce yourself and tell us where you're from. And if this is your first live stream, let us know that. And so one thing that we just want to let people know is that if you learn something new, a new tip or trick, make sure that you hit the like button. And if you haven't subscribed to the channel, make sure that you subscribe so you can be notified of future live streams and other videos that will be on the channel. So a couple of people I just want to acknowledge before we get started. We have two people that will be kind of serving as moderators. So we have Agent K and Jazz Dude. So I'll mute my phone here. So I'd like to thank them for the help that they do as people kind of get closer to, as people need help, or if someone gets a little misbehaved, they can kind of, keep some of the discussion in line and on subject. So we appreciate their help. If you want to see topics that have been covered in previous live streams or the live streams, you could always check the top of the comments field for each of the live streams. And there will be timestamped index. But if you wanted to search in one location for any topic that's been covered in the live stream, you could go to cubaseindex.com. And we want to thank Jan from Stockholm for getting that set up. So that's a wonderful resource. And one other great resource, in addition to all the official Steinberg, resource materials that are available, you could also check out the Cubase Nation Discord. I know Jazz Dude is involved with getting that organized, so I'd like to thank him for all his efforts that he does with that as well. So we'll wait just a couple minutes, let some people get logged in. And we'll get started here in just a minute or two. So we'll see some familiar faces. Let's go ahead and take a look. All right, so we'll get started. So the question is, hi, Greg. Is there any way to normalize the clip gain level across different events in a track? Example, imported events, even better. Can this be done over a number of tracks at the same time? Thanks. All right, so if we have a number of audio events here, so it's not quite a normalize where it's not going to put it all to the same amount, but if you wanted to increment or decrement, you could select all of your audio tracks and just adjust the actual value here, but it's not going to say a -6 dB uniformly across multiple files. Another method that you could do this with a keyboard shortcut, I think it's under increment or decrement event volume. So you could use that as keyboard shortcuts. And that could actually do it, and that will increment or decrement up 1 dB or down 1 dB at a time, depending on what you choose. But a normalize can kind of raise all of the tracks to like a particular volume level. The clip gain won't do that, but if you needed to select multiple events and be able to adjust the clip gain quickly, you could just, select all audio events and, use your increment decrement key commands, or adjust one, and that will adjust the volume level incrementally or decrementally across multiple selected files. Okay, so another question we have is, hi, Greg, I'm using version 10.5. Tried using the arranger track when setting an event to repeat twice, and the mode is to pause. It doesn't pause, but continues. Am I doing something wrong? So let's go ahead. I think I set up a quick arranger track here. So if we have our arranger track, and we'll go to our setup. So I'll have the A section here repeat twice and then go to the B section. So I will go ahead and edit the arranger mode. And then once I will set this to pause after repeats. So I will go ahead and start playing with the arranger track activated, and we'll see what happens. So it should repeat. And then when it gets to the end, I believe it will pause. And now when I hit play again, it'll just go on to the second event. So it seems that is working. So make sure, one, that you're actually starting maybe from the beginning of the event and not in the middle of the event. Make sure that we have the mode here, and you may have to just kind of slide this over to see the mode category, and then that you have pause after repeats, but that seems to be functioning. Obviously I'm not in 10.5 and I'm in 11.03, but it seems to be kind of functioning as expected. I don't remember any changes with that particular function. So let me know, Mark, if I'm doing something differently than you are. All right, great to see Rob from Tarpon Springs, Florida, and Sir Robert from Atlanta. All right. And we have Brian Sawyer checking in from North Carolina, and Uno from Finland. All right. So we have a question from Brian Sawyer. How do you put Cubase in multi-processor modes? I believe it is set that way by default, but you go to Studio Setup. And then when we go to the audio system, here you could just choose to activate multi-processing. So if that is checked there, then Cubase is utilizing all of your different processing cores. So once again, go to your Studio menu, to Studio Setup, select the audio system, and then you could activate the multi-processing right there. All right, so we have Dario from Italy. We see Jazz Dude is on the live stream with Agent K, and John Costigan from Kenosha. All right, and we have Stefan from Sweden, Detlef from Dusseldorf. All right, we have Christian D68 from France. All right, and we have Jan from Stockholm. All right, we have Taylor from Pine Grove, Pennsylvania. We have some GT from Norway. All right, so we have One Man and His Songs, the creator of the wonderful Hallian video tutorials. Thanks for joining us. All right, so we have Loretta from Vancouver. See the Jazz Dudes posted an invite to the Cubase Nation Discord. All right, we have Joseph checking in from Miami. All right, Michael Pierce from outside of London. Okay, so we have a question. Greg, thanks for your help. Could you give us your insights on what is the best way to search your entire library for a specific sound? For instance, search for a subsonic low bass sound. All right, so if I was just going to look for content, so I would just come over here if you want to do kind of the whole library. So you could see kind of all of your different sound sets here, but you could, and those are like the factory content. But if you just go to your file browser here, you can say, okay, I just want to go for VST sound. And, if I was looking for sub, I could just kind of type in sub. And at this point, we could have different audio files, different presets. But let's say if I just want to do sub bass, at this point you could just, and that will kind of search throughout, your entire computer or just the VST sound library. You can have access to kind of all of your different sounds. Now, if you wanted to also, come over here and just kind of do more kind of methodical searching, you could say, if you go into more of the large media bay, we could say, okay, I'm looking in VST sound and I'm looking for not projects, but I want audio files. And at this point, we could just say, okay, I wanted it to not be, let's say, have sampler, and there's going to be kind of different attributes that you could set. So you can say, okay, I want bass, and I want this to be synth bass. And, at this point, you could kind of pick. That will kind of filter through all of your libraries of different synth bass audio files, or if you want it to be for not audio files, but maybe plug-in presets. You could come right over here and now see synth bass presets from instruments. So that's how I would kind of search for kind of sub bass sounds. Okay, so we just see a question from Jan at CubaseIndex.com. Greg, at the Zoom meeting, you told us your vacation is close. How close, Jan? So I did it kind of at the end. I guess it was like around the 17th through the 20th or 16th through the 20th last month. So we just kind of did a quick trip to Ocean City, Maryland, which is about a 3-hour drive. But we may try to do something in August before school starts for my son. So if there's any times when I'm not going to be able to make it, I'll, if there's any disruption to our normal schedule, I'll make sure to announce it in advance. Okay. All right. So we see Daryl from Oakland. Okay, just reading through comments here. Okay, so I just see from Rob, after finding a group of samples, you search how do you save the group for future use? Thanks for your help. So if you have found a particular group of samples, one of the things you could do is that I like to do is just to kind of come over here. So let's say I'll just jump back to maybe our full media bay, So I'm not sure if we could actually save a search criteria, but a lot of times what I do with folders is I will come over here and say, okay, I want to go to documents and let's say into my projects folder. This is what I do a lot of times. And, if I know I have particular kick drum samples, I'll come over here and click on add favorite. And I'll just say, okay, we're going to add this folder as a favorite. And now when I go to search, I could actually just say, okay, here's all of my favorites folders. And that's a particular way. But I don't know if you could actually save like a search criteria, because you could actually just simply search based on a criteria very quickly. But I often will just kind of right click on folders that I frequently access and will, come over here and say, okay, I wanted to take this folder and, for different folders, and just at that point, say I like this one, right click on it and add it to the favorite, so that you always have a quick reference point to go back to. All right. Hey, Greg. So we have a question. Hey, Greg, I got the Cubase 10.5 Pro recently. Then it crashes when I use more than 30 plus tracks. My laptop specs are 16 gigs of RAM, 500 gig SSD and all. Could you show me your preference settings? So a lot of times when we do this, some things that you may want to work with, I'm not sure if it's a PC or a Mac laptop. But when I come over here to the audio system, make sure that you have multi-processing going, that you have activate ASIO guard. On the Windows platform here, you'll see another setting that says activate like Steinberg audio power scheme or something like that. And make sure that you have that checked, because a lot of times laptops, one of their biggest criteria is how long the battery lasts. And, what companies will do is kind of throttle the power of the CPU so that the battery lasts longer. And while that's great if you're, trying to, get that last, bit of processing power, like on a flight or something, what you really want to do is to make sure that Cubase is being able to access the full power of the system. So make sure that you have the Steinberg power scheme enabled for laptop use. And if you're using third-party plugins, try to see if it could be tied to a particular plugin. But those are things that I would try immediately first with the laptop. All right, so we see Tiago just saying hi. He's learned a lot from watching all the videos. That's great. So there's a lot of great resources, hopefully. Okay, so we have a question. Ever since I updated to Cubase 11, my mouse is hypersensitive in editing modes. Just wondering if there is any adjustment for this. So there isn't any specific Cubase adjustment for that. I don't think there's any real changes going from previous versions to 11 in regards to kind of mouse sensitivity. I know that, a lot of people, and with many applications with the Apple Magic Mouse, where if you move it around, it could kind of change settings unexpectedly. So I've kind of heard that with the Apple Magic Mouse, and I used one, and I just personally really disliked it, and got like a $10 Logitech mouse, and it just worked amazingly better. But I don't think that there's anything particular with any changes in Cubase to the mouse. If you're on a Windows platform, you could try going to the preferences to general and see if you disable or enable high DPI mode, if that makes any difference in the mouse sensitivity. But there's really no adjustments in Cubase for mouse sensitivity that I'm aware of. All right, so we have Space Station Studio checking in from Malaysia. Thanks for joining us. All right, and we have Peter from Montreal, Canada, and Joshua from Oman, and Ted Springman from Sherman Oaks. All right, and we have Matt Elston from London. Thanks for joining us. All right, so I just see from Kevin Mehmed, so he's having He wants to do like a team viewer session with vocals. So I might be available tomorrow afternoon, Kevin, if you want to reach out to me. Okay, so we see it's probably dealing with our arranger track question. Let me just find it again here. So it says in the arranger track, I was playing back from within the arranger chain editor. That's where I had the problem with pause after repeat mode. So I'll go ahead and give it a try from within the arranger editor. So I'm not sure if it's like within this editor, if we go ahead and play here. See if there's a way to just kind of activate it from here. But let's say I'll leave this open and we'll try it again and see if it pauses after the second counter. So we have this repeating twice and then going to section B with the mode set to pause after repeats. So let's go ahead and see if it pauses after its repeat. And then if I hit play again, like from the space bar, it'll just play the next section to the end. Then I'll probably go back to A because that's the end of the arranger chain. So let me know if you're instantiating it from the transport, or maybe if you're instantiating the transport behavior from here. And also always make sure that the arranger chain is active. Okay, so just see question, how to add effects part by part. Please tell us. I'm not sure if you wanted to do it on an individual part. So if you wanted to just quickly add effects on a part and apply it, you could just kind of select the event, go to audio, and let's go to plugins. So if I wanted to just add a reverb to this drum part, I will just come right over here and, you know, so as we do this, and I'll just deactivate the arranger mode here, and I'm just going to set our my tail. So let's say, so now if I select this, I could, and F7 will open up your offline processing, or just go to plugins. So you can say, okay, I want Revelation applied there. And let's say on this event, I wanted to add a flanger. So now we hear the reverb. And then no processing. And what's kind of cool about this is you could just add other processes. So you say, okay, I just wanted to take that and reverse it. And I wanted to take this and let's do another process. And I want to do a stereo flip, and let's add a filter. So let's say, okay, I just want to add a more filter on that particular section. So now you can hear the reverse. And then just going back, I could just, if I wanted to at any point, I could just say delete all, and the original files will always be intact. So that's one way you could do it. And if you wanted to add effects like on the track that would be processed in real time, we could just go to either your insert effects to apply it in a dedicated manner to a particular track. So you can say, okay, I just wanted to add a delay plugin. So as we... So you could just kind of add a delay, or if you wanted to go to sends, so if you wanted a reverb to be shared across multiple, we could just right click and choose to add an effects channel to send one. So those are a couple different ways. All right, so we see that Michael Teams has joined the live stream from outside of Fort Worth, and we have Rick checking in from Dallas. Michael wants everyone to whack the like button. All right, and we see Tim Weinheimer, so he's wonderful to see him from Mission Viejo. All right, and Michael Teams is already dispensed with free virtual ice cream. What else could you want in life? Cubase knowledge and free ice cream. All right. All right, wonderful to see Millard Brown. All right, so we have a question from Bernie, and we had some people who wanted like a timestamp of when the question is that I'm reading from. So this is submitted at 1:17. So wonderful to see Bernie. He's a wonderful guitar player. I think plays with Michael McDonald and wonderful songwriter. Check out his stuff on YouTube and all his CDs. All right. So it says, hi, Greg. Having a little trouble applying changes to my mix console colors. The app option doesn't seem to be there. So if we have a number of channels, let's say if I select all of these channels and I want them to be, let's say, red in color. So let me just select the channels here, and I'm going to change the colors. So we'll see this, and when we go to, let's say, our full screen mixer, so we can see kind of the colors here, and these can be added, and this was added, Bernie, in version 10.5 and higher was when this feature is added. So if you're running like a 10.05, which I think I may just remember just looking at what a screenshot you posted on Facebook recently, you may not have this feature, but you would go to your preferences and under user interface, you would see mix console and channel, or I'm sorry, let's go to all right, so you'll see track and mix console channel colors. So we can see the mix console channels just laid out for you right there. So if I wanted to have that be more intense of the channel color, we could have that. So that's basically carrying over the channel color that you have from the main project window. So so we can see that kind of carried throughout kind of the whole mix console as well. So once again, that preference is going to be under preferences to user interface, track and mix console channel colors. And then you could just turn that on right there. And if you don't have that, because that was introduced in 10.5, so make sure that you have that version. If you have that version, you should be able to see that functionality, Bernie. Thanks for joining us in the live stream. And again, check out Bernie's stuff on YouTube. Wonderful songwriter. I love his stuff. All right, great to see Charles K on the live stream again. Okay, reading through comments. All right, so we have a question. It says export wave error when I save with one vocal track with drums and guitar and drums. So, make sure that when you're doing it, one is as you're doing an export audio mixdown, if you make sure that the left and right locators are around all the events, sometimes these can get reversed and you may get a message. So one easy way of doing that is just select the events and hit the letter P. So make sure that you don't have the left and right locators. And sometimes if the cycle is activated, Kevin, you may notice that this will go from like a blue, and when they're reversed, you can get kind of an orange color. And some people wonder why reverse like the cycle markers, but one thing that you could do when reversing cycle markers is just, if you're in cycle mode, you could just skip that section entirely of the projects if you wanted to see what it sounds like, just skipping a part. So make sure that you don't have the left and right locators reversed accidentally, Kevin. So we just see, is Cubase easy to learn for an FL user? So I think Cubase is pretty easy. I've seen, probably one of the fastest people I've ever seen run Cubase is Stevie Wonder, and he's blind. So, if it works well for unsighted people, it will work probably pretty well for people that are seeing stuff. And while Cubase has probably way more options than other programs, you don't have to always use them. But if you do need to, like, let's say you've gone down this rabbit hole, that feature to get out of the rabbit hole will be there waiting for you. So I think Cubase is an easy program to use. Okay, so we have a question from Aaron Baker. Since we are addressing some issues, I just bought 11. I bought Pro 11 last Saturday, and I'm still isn't working. Last night, the place I bought it said I had to buy the dongle in order to get it working. Is this true? So yeah, to have Cubase Pro or Cubase Artist working, you'll need to have the USB-E licenser connected to your system, and that will be holding the license. All right, so we see Tyrone is from Atlanta has joined us. Thanks for joining us on the live stream this Tuesday. All right, so we see a question, when will we be doing the Logical Editor Hangout? So I'll have to do some prep work for it. I know I promised it earlier. But if everyone wants to email me any potential logical editor scenarios, I'd be happy to incorporate that into the Hangout. So I will get it done. I just haven't had much of a chance to. Other work stuff has been busy as well. But if people want to email me like logical editor scenarios, I'd be happy to show that and use those examples. So you could send any logical or project logical editor like questions if you want to send them to clubcubase@steinberg.de. That'd be great, and then we could use those for different scenarios to cover in a logical editor hangout. All right, wonderful that Sable Winters could join us. All right, so just seeing from Aaron Baker, no, I never owned anything of Steinberg. This download version, thank you for replying. I was skeptical when he said I had to buy something else, so thank you. Yeah, so yeah, it's no problem. You just simply purchase the USB-E licenser, and then that is where the license for the program will be installed. So. All right, so we just had a feature request from Ron for multi-track editing on Audio Warp. So yeah, it's a well-known feature request. So hopefully we'll see that implemented sometime. But I know the developers and the planning team are very aware of it. But they'll see this again as part of this discussion. So thanks for passing that along. Okay. So I see, as a former Cubase user, I've missed the highlight color of Cubase. Is there a way I can change the Nuendo red highlight color like Cubase? So, when an event is highlighted inside of Cubase, it will kind of invert the colors, whereas Nuendo kind of gives it a red outline, and we'll just show this for people that haven't seen it. All right, so we can see that this one selected here, it's not as obvious. It's kind of a red outline instead of the kind of the colors being inverted. So I will pass that along again. I know I've passed it on. I'm not sure if there's any particular reason for that, or just maybe someone's differentiation they didn't like. But I believe that I agree with you that the Cubase method of showing what is selected is a bit more obvious. Okay, we see, hey Greg, is it possible to have the edit button enabled for a MIDI channel for a multi-output instrument like Contact, Omnisphere? Only the first channel has the edit button available. All right, so let's say if I come here and I add let's say an instrument track. So, and I'll just do like a Halion. All right, so I'll just add a couple of patches here in different MIDI channels. Okay, so now let's say if I am here and I add different MIDI tracks. So as soon as I come here, we could see our very first one. We're going to have the edit instrument channel to pull up the particular instrument. You click here to open up the particular instrument. But if you wanted to see let me make sure I'm reading this right. So here we have kind of, so if it's more of a so we could have your multiple channels like that. But if we go back to our VSTi, so say we have our Halion and now we activate outputs. Okay, and so say if I come directly to this output, so now if I go to output 2, this will show and click here on the edit instrument. That will open up the instrument right there. So almost like opening up the automation lane when we have multiple outputs for a particular instrument. You could click here in the lower left-hand corner And then these are all the outs from your particular instrument. And then you could just click here or hit the edit VST instrument key command, and that will open up the instrument for you. So let me know if that works for you. All right. Okay, so we see from Kevin Mehmed, the track says export error with multiple tracks and immediately crashes after the second vocal track. I got it to save later, but it would save the second vocal track, but saves the drums and guitars. So if you're doing your export audio mix down from here, so if you want to, come over here, so you could have multiple tracks. So if you're trying to make stems, that's when maybe you'd want to select all your instrument or audio tracks. But if it's just a simple mix down, Kevin, try just to click on single and choose the stereo out and see if that will work for you. Okay, so we see a question, I think it was from Michael Pierce. Let me find it. Okay, so the question is, hi Greg, are there any advantages to drawing automation directly on a clip with the pencil tool versus automating the fader if ultimately all processing is happening on a group further down the line? So, if we're doing, if we have the pencil tool on the clip, we could think of this as kind of pre-gain. So if I come here and just draw this in, this is kind of before, those volume changes are before it hits the channel. So we could think of this, if we look at our signal flow, this will come before the inserts, the channel strip, the EQ, the sends, and the fader. So and when we have automation, when we click at the bottom and we look at it like this, we could just have the events there that's going to tie directly to the fader. So it's really kind of a different gain stage. So just like your clip gain could be before it hits when drawing on the event, that comes before the audio is actually processed. So that's kind of, so there are advantages, like, if you wanted to just, bring up a syllable in a vocal or bring it down, you could do stuff like that. So some people will draw in this for breaths, so kind of a different technique, but it's kind of at different stages of the signal flow as well. All right, so I just see a question or comment. I want to give some lessons using Cubase 10.5 Pro to some of my newbie friends, and when they start, they can't hear what I'm playing for them in my program. All right, so I'm not sure what you're using to transmit, but what I do for like these sessions is I basically take my microphone and my audio source and feed it out in my audio interface, and I feed that out to a USB based mixer, and that's what everyone is listening to, so people could hear the audio from Cubase and my voice. So I'm not sure if you're using OBS but generally, you might have to come up with a way, if you're on Windows platform, maybe voice metered or some utilities to so that people could actually hear your, hear your audio coming out of Cubase plus your voice. But there's some software solutions, but sometimes just using a dedicated audio interface for the transmission can make sense. Okay, so we see, I'm not sure if this is just a repeat of the previous question, but how do you add an effect to a particular part of a track? And it's really just, okay, I wanted to take this drum loop. Let me just get rid of some of my clip gains. So let's say I just wanted to, we'll play this drum loop. So if I wanted to just take that particular section there, and again, it's going to plugins, and so say here I just wanted to add an EQ, or let's do something a little more fun. So say distortion, and let's go to grungelizer, and I wanted that to add crackle and noise and distortion and AC hum at 60 cycles. So now when we play back the audio file, you'll hear it normal, and this section here will be processed with the plugin. So that's how you could do it. So just select the range, go to audio to plugins, or you could just instantiate this by hitting F7, select a range, and then just adding your plugin. And the cool thing about that is anytime later, you could just come over here and Cubase will remember what plugins were added, so you could undo it at any time. All right, so just see translate to Spanish, please. So I think a lot of times you might be able to, we do, we make sure that the closed captioning is going to be involved, is part of it. So I'm not sure if the translation, but if you enable your closed captioning, you might be able to have it translate in real time. But I think afterwards you could actually just watch that, you could watch it in different languages based on the closed captioning. So. Okay, so we just see, I'm curious if there's a common way for me to make an instrumental beat on my Cubase mobile and convert it into my PC Cubase software. Thanks in advance. So really all you have to do is there's a little utility that you could download, and it's a Cubase file importer. And then all you have to do is just say import Cubase project. And that will take your Cubase project for iOS or Android and be able to just simply import it directly into Cubase and kind of finish off all the work right there. All right, we just see a comment from Peter Brown. Hi, Greg. I appreciate all your knowledge, how knowledgeable you are in every facet of operation and control you have about Cubase and other Steinberg products. You have worked very hard at it, obviously. I'm just kind of an idiot savant, I think. So, I can't run Excel to save my life. But, and I've been, working with Cubase for, over 30 years or about 30 years now. And, working with the company for about over 29 years. So, but thank you for your kind words. All right, so I just see macro controls, please. So I'm not sure if that's a question or if you want to show macro, but if you, so creating a macro is just by going to your key commands, and then you could click on show macros. And what a macro is going to be is just to, create a series of keyboard shortcuts that will, that will kind of, execute a whole series of keyboard shortcuts so that you don't have to do like these edits multiple times. So if you wanted to just kind of come over here, you could just say, I wanted to do particular macros. But if you have a macro that you want to get done, you could just come over and, if you like, here's one for minimizing breaths that I created. So you could select kind of with a range, and it'll go through and basically knock down that range selection down by minus 12 dB. So that could be kind of in a way to do a macro. But if there's a particular function you want the macro for, just let me know. But, macro will just execute a series of keyboard shortcuts, and the macro can then have its own custom assigned keyboard shortcut to trigger it. All right. Hi, Greg. I'm on Cubase 11 Windows. I'm having a heck of a time trying to get the audio out for live streams, screen captures, etc. Is there any easy way to do this? So, yeah, just like I mentioned before, check out, a lot of people use Voice Meter, but many of the screen captures and the live stream software doesn't use ASIO and isn't really designed for pro audio use. So that's kind of why. So again, what I do is take, my microphone and I take it out into a mixer, and I combine that with my audio interface outputs into the same mixer. And when I go into, like, I'm using OBS, which you could use for tutorials or creating videos, I have not, I have for this, I have my Yamaha USB mixer. That's what I use for all the transmission. So I could change sample rates, I could load up projects and not have any worries about it. But there are some utilities, they're not pretty. Some people, I think the company that does Reaper makes like a restream, but that seems to cause a lot of problems for people. So there's some different options. And you could also, see if the other ones would, work under ASIO. That's always helpful too. So you don't have to rely on audio system drivers that cause latencies and don't work well for pro audio stuff. All right, so I just see from Peter Brown, would real-world applications of the DAW in certain various genres be away from your wheelhouse? Thanks. I've worked in all sorts of different genres. I don't think it would be out of my wheelhouse, but if there's any questions you have, please, just feel free to let us know. All right, so just a timestamp for the question I'm at now is at 1:38 p.m., so 38 minutes after the live stream started. Okay, so we have hello, Greg, Don Miller from Fresno, California here. Excuse me. Can I import drum samples, waves with multiple velocity layers in Acoustic Agent? If so, can you show the method? Thank you. So Acoustic Agent is going to be kind of fixed to the content that is there, so you can't really do that so much in the Acoustic Agent. So the Acoustic Agent's really kind of more of a playback engine, but you could do it very easily using the Beat Agent. So let's say if I wanted to come over here and I have a Groove Agent kit, and I'll just quickly kind of cut all the samples. I'll just right click here and I'll cut the kit. So if I wanted to take, a number of samples, so let's say, the drummer very kindly doing sound check, they gave us a number of different kick drums. So I have 3 different kick drum mics. So if I wanted to take the kick drums, I could now just drag these to an instrument track. And so once I do this, the 3 samples will be laid out for you. And then you could try to layer the 3 kicks if you wanted to, or you could choose to do a round robin. You could have it randomized or based on velocity, so that the 3 different sounds could be layered. So you could do that in a Beat Agent kit, and we could think of Beat Agent as more for making your own sounds, an acoustic agent for playing back kind of very carefully crafted drum kit content. So while users can't necessarily make their own agent kit, they're where they can't make their own acoustic agent kits, you can with your beat kits, and you'll kind of get to this same spot very quickly. So just kind of drag, and you could have up to 32 velocity layers per pad. And thanks for joining us. Okay, so we see a question. I use Cubase on my tablet, Android, and I'm trying to mix the software with the PC software so I can maximize how I produce beats and throw guitar tracks in so I don't have to rely on my PC version. So yeah, the two are separate programs, but you can take your any of your Cubase projects and just come right over here and import. So you'll just get the Cubase project importer. It's a little utility you could download. And once you have that, you could take your Cubase projects. And so as people are kind of starting, maybe a more mobile writing experience, something that's maybe a more creative environment, that you could just simply import that into Cubase and finish it and apply other perhaps more powerful tools. All right, so we see question. Is it possible to smooth out expression and velocity tracks after they've been drawn or performed with fader movement? Sometimes the recorded fader movement is jittery and causes issues. All right, so let's say, just jump to a new project, or it's just, I think, just add this. All right, so, like most sequencers, Cubase will record whatever has been kind of thrown into it. So if you recorded some movements, some, let's say, MIDI CC data. So let's say, I think you mentioned velocity as well. So let's say I'm here and okay, so now I have, so say if I wanted to kind of take the velocity and maybe smooth it out, a couple of things you could do is, like, let's say we select all the notes, is if you go to the center edge, you can kind of, the center right edge, and hold the left mouse button down, you could kind of smooth out your different velocity data. And let's take a look at doing maybe modulation or some MIDI CC data. So let's say we'll come here and let's say it's a very so let's say all right, and let me just put like some steps in here. All right, so if I wanted to smooth out the CC data, you could kind of come over here on the right center edge, and then you could smooth it out just like that. So if it's a little abrupt, but with kind of a lot of these types of edits, sometimes people look at it and it looks abrupt, but it may not sound that way. So always use your ears, but you could just kind of select and just go to the right center edge. And then you could kind of just come over here and smooth out different types of controller or velocity data to smooth it out. All right, so just see from Drew Miller, and it was kind of further discussion on using Cubase for Android. Says one other comment: I'm basically trying to use my tablet as MIDI. So while Cubase won't necessarily send MIDI clock over to Cubase and do that, I think the intention is to maybe you could start a project anywhere you're at on your phone or your tablet, capture the initial idea where maybe you're not in your studio and take that into Cubase, as opposed to both of the programs running synchronized together. So the intention is maybe starting the creative process and then finishing it, starting the creative process in your tablet or phone with Cubase and finishing it in Cubase if you need to. All right, so we just see a question. Hi, Greg. My mix down does not sound the same way as in software. I'm using Cubase 11 Elements. So there are a number of different factors. So if you have, let's say you're looking at a project and we have our master fader. Okay, and a lot of people, and especially in Cubase Elements, may use the master fader as kind of their monitoring volume of how loud they're listening to it in the speakers. But realize that if we are doing something like that and we have our master fader down, so say I'll just want to export like this particular file, and I have my exported audio mix down file here, my master fader is set really low. So when I would export this, I would assume that I would see roughly kind of the same level of amplitude or how loud that particular file will be. So I will just come over here. Let's do a quick export audio mix down, but I'm going to move my master fader down significantly. I'm going to say, let's just import this and we'll create a new audio track. And at this point, I'm going to add it to the queue and we start our queue export. All right. So we do this and we go all the way down. We could see that the amplitude is going to be much smaller, and I must have had this set to split. So I'll just do that one more time. So let's do our export audio mix down, and I'll just do this as interleaved, and I'll set my queue export and we'll look at it. And now that file will be significantly less volume just because of where the master fader is, because at the end of the mix down process, it's going through the master fader, and this master fader might be told to decrease the volume. Also, realize that some of the different effects and stuff like that can also sound different. And if you're doing it to an MP3 file versus a WAV file, that you're going to have degradation in the audio quality there. All right, so Michael Pierce wants everyone to smash the like button. So all right, let me find my spot. Thanks for all the great questions. All right, so we see, hi Greg, what will happen if I lose or break my dongle with all my licenses on it? So there is a Steinberg 0 downtime policy. So if your software is registered, what has happened for a lot of people, if you kind of lose it or it gets broken and it's registered, they can oftentimes and this is done by Steinberg in Germany. They can reissue the licenses and deactivate the previous licenses. So you just do a quick search on Steinberg Zero Downtime, ZDT. And I've used the same dongle for 20 years as well. So, and I just see, will a new dongle see all my licenses? So basically you could drag the licenses from, if you think like, a lot of times maybe the plastic cover may come off. I've seen that a lot. And or it gets bent somehow, but if it's still functioning and you got kind of a backup e-licenser, you could transfer the licenses from your old e-licenser to your new e-licenser. It doesn't allow you to have them in both locations. It's basically moving it from one device to the other. All right, great to see Alexander Plasko on the live stream again. All right, so our current, all right, so we see Mark Rabin on the live stream. So I'm currently at 1:50 p.m. on the questions. So just as a reference for people. Okay, so we see question, is there a way to save the mixer presets? If I save them and close Cubase, they are gone when restarting it. So, once we have kind of the mixer presets kind of set up here. So let's say, okay, I wanted to save. Okay, so let's say I want to take these tracks and save them. If you go to the little drop-down menu here, you could choose to save selected channels, and we'll just call it July 6th. And now let's say I do a new project. All right, and I'm just going to just make sure where I saved it to. Okay, so it's going to be in my bicycle folder. Okay, so let's do new project. And let's load selected channels. So let's say if I come here. And then all those settings would automatically be carried over. Another method of doing this is just coming over here and importing tracks from project. So let's say I wanted to go to this particular I could select the projects, and here I could import all the channel and inspector settings from any project and choose not to import the events or parts as well. So if you want to save static mixer setups, those are two different ways of doing it. But just make sure that, once you export your mix from this, that you just know where it's being, what folder it's being saved to. It'll be saved as a .vmx file. So we see, yo, this thing make beats. So yeah, definitely Cubase can be used to make beats and much more. So I just see any way to rename the MIDI track and audio output simultaneously. Okay, so let's see. So if I want to do an audio output, so okay, so I have my stereo out here and my MIDI 01. I'll select both of those. So if I wanted to just come over here to a project logical editor, I could say, okay, so I'm going to say property is set to okay, let me just say media type is equal to an audio. And we could do media type is equal to MIDI. And we'll say our property is set to event is selected. The name. And see if I did this right. So transform. So let's see if we could do. Okay, so I'll just do container type is track. Property is set to event is selected. And I want to rename it this. So, yep. So you could do it using the project logical editor. So set function, go to transform, go to container type is equal to track. And we want to say that if the track is selected at that point, so I'll select those and we'll go to action target to name and we'll replace the name with whatever gibberish we want. And now you could rename both tracks simultaneously. Okay, so we have a question. Every time I try to change the BPM of my session, only the MIDI changes. How can I get the audio to change tempo? Okay, so let's just jump back to this particular project here. So you want to make sure that, one, that all of the audio tracks are in musical mode. So you may have to just select all of your audio events, and we could do this just by selecting them here and then putting it into musical mode. And if Cubase knows what the tempo is, either if it's a loop or if it's been recorded into Cubase, Cubase will know. And at that point, I could hit play. And I could just now type in whatever tempo I want. And my audio will follow. So select all of the events. Make sure that they are in musical mode. And at that point, once they're in musical mode, you'll see this little icon appear. Then they'll follow the tempos that you type in. Okay, so we have someone checking in from Brazil. That's great. Okay, so I just see from Drew Miller, just says drag and drop samples. I'm not sure if that's a question or not, but if here's a couple of different ways you could drag and drop samples. So if you want it to be like a sampler, you know, I could come over here, and if I have my sampler track, we could drag and drop an audio file. Let me just jump back home here. So any audio file that I want, I could drag and drop right into the sampler track. I could drag and drop from like an audio file right into the sampler track. If we have this, you know, drag and drop audio from the media bay to the timeline, or if you have Groove Agent, you could drag and drop any audio event to, you know, we could treat Groove Agent like a drum sampler, and we could just drag and drop that directly to audio files as well. So that's some of the different drag and drop options for audio, but you could also do with, you know, effects and other sorts of different things as well. All right, so just see from Christian D68. Hello, Greg. I saw it in a video from Dom Segal that he was inserting chords, 3 notes, just by adding 1 note with the insert tool in the MIDI editor. How could we do this? Let's take a quick look. I haven't seen the video, unfortunately. I have to look for that one. But let's just quickly add a quick instrument track. Okay, so, and okay, I'm just gonna reread it again. Okay, so you could come over here if you have the chord pads open, you know, you could, you know, drag and drop chords directly, you know, into the timeline from the chord pad. If you have a chord track, so let's say if I'm here and I have a chord, you know, and, you know, once you have kind of the chord pads as, so let's say if I'm here, I could go to my chord pads, you know, and I could play the chord. Just by hitting this particular note on my MIDI controller. If we have chord tracks here, you know, so let's say we have some different chords and I'm in this part, you know, one of the cool things you could do is enable the global track. So you can say, okay, here's my chord track, and let's see if we just drag, if that is just kind of, if we could drag that down to the event. But if you have chord tracks also, let me just delete all the notes here. But as soon as I just, you know, want to take like different chords, I could just take these and drop them in like directly on the part. So let me know if that kind of makes sense. But let's take a look at one more place. So let's say we're in our key editor. And he said it was with the insert tool. You And I know you, let's see if you're in the list editor. That you could come over here. So here we could do notes and switch between different controllers. But I think so it doesn't allow you to drag it down from the chord track. Yeah, so I don't know how, you know, if you could send me a video link, I could show it for next live stream if you want. Okay, thanks for all the great questions. If you learned something new, make sure that you hit the like button. Okay, reading through comments. All right, so you just see a question. Sometimes I have a problem saving projects. When I try to save huge projects, it takes a lot of time to do it. Is there a solution for that? So often, you know, depending on the plugins that are using, so sometimes, you know, particular plugins can take a long time to actually save because you have to, you know, there could be a lot of information, especially working with complex samples. So it could be, you know, particular plugins that could cause long save time. So, you know, so that would probably be kind of the, you know, the approach to take. But, you know, as long as it's kind of saving, it's, you know, figuring out exactly, you know, what it needs to do to actually, you know, figure out to have that file, you know, be saved correctly. So sometimes it may have to, you know, just deal with lots of data, and some plugins deal with that faster than others. So, all right, so we see Spectral Layers 1. What else can it do besides separating vocals and instruments? I'm new to it, so let's take a quick look. So you could do just some basic spectral editing. So Spectral Layer 1, Spectral Layers 1, you can actually kind of get, you know, with Cubase, and it's kind of like almost a, you know. So let's say if I just wanted to come over here and maybe I had an audio file, let's just take a listen. So let's say I'll just get this. You may blow into the microphone accident. So let's say, all right, sorry about keep wanting to arm the selected track. So let's, all right, so let's say I had like just like a breath noise. You may blow into the microphone accidentally, like right here, like where someone, you know, or, you know, someone hit a mic stand, you know, like another kind of classic scenario here. So, and this is, it's a recording of my voice. So, all right, so let's say we'll just kind of take, let's say a mic stand sound. So let's listen to this. Blow into the microphone accident. So if I wanted to just kind of get rid, you know, or this is going to be problematic on this particular track. So let's. You may also be talking and accidentally hit the microphone stand. We hear these kind of low level noises. You may blow into the microphone accent. So let's say I wanted to now come over here and I'll just kind of switch this on, and I wanted to get rid of that sound. You may also be talking and accidentally hit the microphone. All right, so here when we kind of zoom in, you know, we could see that this is kind of where the activity is, where we have this bright highlight of the low frequencies. And accidentally. So if I wanted to get rid of that with Spectral Layers 1, you could just kind of choose, you know, if you want to do kind of an elliptical selection, and we could zoom in. And let's just navigate down here. So what I could do is I'm just going to select that particular range. And now as we listen to the file, and I just hit the delete key, instead of, you know, EQing the voice out, I could just edit those particular frequencies. So now let me listen to it. You may also be talking and accidentally hit the microphone stand. So just at that point, I could just take out the breaths, you know, where someone had hit something. So those types of things you could do with Spectral Layers, where it's going to be kind of independent, like frequency dependent editing. So let's listen to kind of like a breath here. You may blow into the microphone accent. So we see this white area. So if when working with that, again, I'll zoom in. And let's just navigate down here. So again, I will just kind of take and we'll listen to the file again. So we want to get the breath. So I will just kind of come over here. We'll do the elliptical selection and just kind of take out that. So as we want to listen to it now, you may blow into the microphone accidentally. I could just edit those particular frequencies out. You know, like one of the things on like one of my first CDs I did like in 91 or 92, you know, the singer and his pause, and no one else could hear, but it was like, you know, nails on a chalkboard to me, accidentally tapped the mic stand with her foot, and this, you know, total, all instruments out, a little vocal break, you know, so being able to edit out the foot tap while she was singing, stuff like that is what you could use Spectral Layers 1 for. All right, so we just see how do you select curves for automation in Cubase 11? All right, so let's say, sorry about that. All right, so if I come over here, let's say I have two different points and I wanted to make a curve out of this. So all you have to do is once you're in the center area between, like, let's say just kind of a straight line, it'll turn into like a little hand tool when you're in the center, and then you could just do various curves laid out just like so. And then if you wanted to double click, you could add another curve point after that, or in between two different points. So that's how you could do curves. Okay, so I just see from Peter Brown, yes, I'm referring to engineering and production protocol with effects and other Cubase onboard applications and standard practices, standard/normal protocol. Thanks. So I'm not sure if, what this was about, but I think with just, you know, adding effects Sorry, that's extra annoying. But just kind of adding effects as inserts and sends. So inserts will be dedicated to the particular track, and sends will be can be shared across multiple tracks. So most people would use reverbs and delays shared across multiple tracks via sends, and dedicated effects that are going to be dedicated to a particular track as an insert. Okay, so we have a question. If you're a loop developer with an enormous library, does Cubase have an analysis function to spot duplicated loops? So generally, if the names if they have it'll be able to spot duplicated names, but it's not going to do an analysis and spot duplicated loops, because it could be, and if you have, let's say, 48,000 samples per second, and, doing an analysis of, a change in one sample between two different loops. So you could have it automatically search for duplicate names, but not necessarily duplicate files content. Okay, so I just see, would you please share your track colors? So the track colors I use are just the standard default track colors. So if you go to your project colors setup, just the default base, just the default basic colors. That's what I'm using. So everyone has access to them. So I haven't tweaked them or made them my own. So you have access to it right there. Okay, so I'm just at 2 minutes or 2 hours at 2:05 p.m. On the questions, just as a reference for people. All right, and I see Jazz Dudes mentioning that if you're interested in saving we're in the middle of our big Cubase promotion in July. So if you're interested in saving money on updating or upgrading, or cross grading, you could take advantage of that. I think it's about 40% off. All right, so I just see a question. Would you recommend some monitors for beginners? So I assume that these will be studio speakers. I think, probably for beginners, a great set might be, check out if, for beginners is maybe the Yamaha HS5s. I think are really good, super well-made monitors. And I know people that have, spent a lot of money on studio monitors and then, have kind of migrated to using the Yamaha HS7 is a favorite of a lot of clients that I deal with. So those are quite nice as well. But, for a beginner, if for an audio monitor, like a powered speaker, check out the Yamaha HS5s. So. Okay, so we see, hi Greg, I tried many times to find key command to freeze track, but couldn't make it. Please advise. So yeah, there isn't a key command for freeze track, but really you could get the same exact functionality, just by going to render in place. And we could think of kind of the render in place as kind of a more updated freeze version. So if you just wanted to come here, you could find a keyboard shortcut for render with current settings. And there's a number of different options for the render settings. So if you wanted it to, mute the events, if you wanted to have no processing, you wanted to have the channel settings like inserts and EQs and channel strip. If you wanted to include sends or master effects, if you wanted to add a tail, if you wanted to make a custom name, if you want to take multiple files and bounce it down to one file, if you wanted to mute the source events or keep them there so you can edit. So, try just utilizing the render in place function. It'll do basically the same thing, but with more flexibility than a freeze. Okay. Okay. Hi, Greg. Can you change the BPM of your session with pre-record tracks? So I guess with pre-recorded tracks, so certainly you could do that. So just like we showed a little bit earlier on this particular project, I'll revert this. So, when you record tracks into Cubase, it's going to automatically be tempo stamped. So if I come over here, I'll add an audio track. And we'll say, what is the BPM as the name? Okay, so now when I go to record a track, our tempo is set to 100 beats a minute. So I've recorded this file, and let's look at our pool. So I'll go to my media menu to pool window. We'll go to what is the BPM, and we can see that it's automatically carried over the BPM of the recorded file. So if it's placed into musical mode, so if I select all the audio files and place them into musical mode, so say I'll just select all the audio files here, put them all into musical mode, then whatever tempo I have, it'll just automatically assume that tempo and the tracks will follow. And that's really kind of all you had to do. So any pre-recorded file can be just handled the same way. Okay, so you see a question, how can we cut or delete a certain part of the area from some of the tracks, some or all the tracks in a safe and successful way? So let's say if I just wanted to grab my range tool, and I wanted to cut like that part out of tracks. So if I wanted to, one is if I just hit delete, I could delete like that. If I wanted these parts to do kind of like almost like I think some people will call it like a butt edit. I could just hit Command or Control plus Shift X. So undo that. So I could just say, okay, I wanted to get rid of that. And we'll see that the end will move over to the left. So undo that again. So again, that's Command or Control on Windows. So Mac and Windows, Command Control plus Shift plus X. And if you wanted to, globally set kind of the range, you could hold down, I think it's Control Shift, and that will select everything in a particular range. And if I now hit Control Command plus Shift, I could globally cut. And yeah, so it's safe, and you could always undo it afterwards. All right, so to see probably a question. So I'm sorry, I misexplained the question. I meant the mixer configuration. Every time I save it, it's gone when I restart. So the mixer configuration is going to be stored on a project level. So each project will have its own mixer configuration. So that's going to be kind of unique to the particular project because you'll have probably different tracks in different projects for the most part. If you find yourself working with consistent tracks, you could start off with a template. So save the mixer configurations, and then I'll just try it here real quickly. So we'll come over here. Let's set up, add a configuration. Okay, so let's say I don't want to see any of those channels. And I only want to see drums. If you hold down Shift and click on a folder track, so I'll just come here. Let's add this as a configuration. And let's say I just want to see only bass and guitars. Okay, so now what I want to do is to save this as a template. So I'll come here, save as template. Okay, I'll close that project. We won't save. Do new project. And let's go to our template and go to our mixer configs. Choose a new folder for our template. We'll activate it. And generally you would erase like the actual parts in the media. So now we go to my configurations, and my configurations are going to be stored. So the mixer configurations are going to be kind of based on the actual project as opposed to being based globally, which kind of makes sense because you'll have different tracks and different projects. But if you have consistent tracks, save it as a template, and that will, your mixer configurations will automatically be carried over. All right, so we see Kyle Kennedy joining us for a little bit. Thanks for good to see you on the live stream. All right, and Bill Irwin, so we haven't seen you on the live stream in a long time. It's great to see you. Glad you could join us. All right, so we see a question, how to snap automation to grid when using pencil tool to draw automation or option draw. So let's add an audio track here. Okay, so I'm just going to make sure that snap is turned on. I'll say let's go to our grid. So a lot of times automation, let's see. So, you know, so if it's more for, you know, for a lot of kind of classic mixing stuff, you may not want it to snap to grid. But let's say if I grab, I can see like for EDM stuff where it can make sense. So let's say if I wanted to just snap, let's say to the beat here. So I'm going to use just my range selection tool and say I just want to snap there. So once I have my range selection tool, then you could choose to automate the, you know, you could edit the automation kind of snapped to the grid pretty easily. So try selecting the events first, maybe with, you know, with the range tool, and then you could easily kind of edit the automation and have it locked to the grid. But they don't want to necessarily, if you're doing a fade out, by default have that automation snap to a grid because it could give you kind of unwanted adverse effects. Okay, Okay, reading through more comments. Thanks for all the great discussion. If you learned a new tip or trick, make sure that you hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. And that allows us to continue to do these live streams. So we have from Tanmay, can I have 2 key commands set to 1 key? And if so, if there is a workaround, I want to use it to reverse audio clip and R to reverse MIDI clip. So yeah, you could assign the same keyboard shortcut to multiple functions. So once you go into your key commands, you could assign the same keyboard shortcut to multiple functions. Just be careful though, and make sure that, because that will work, based upon the selection. So if you have a MIDI event and an audio event simultaneously, and you only wanted the audio to reverse, and they were both set to the same key command, and if they're both selected, they'll both be reversed. But if you just have an audio event and trigger that command, the reverse MIDI won't do anything. And if you reverse MIDI, if you have a MIDI clip selected, the reverse audio is not going to do anything. So you could have the same keyboard shortcut set to, to multiple functions, but it could come back and bite you later if you're not careful. So. Okay, so we see hide all disabled key command. So I think we could just do this from the logical editor. So let's say if I wanted to, I'll just do new project here quickly, or I'll just add. Okay, so let's say I have this audio track disabled, and let's say these bottom tracks disabled. All right, and I wanted to hide all of my disabled tracks. So I think if we go to the project logical editor, let's say property is set to container type is equal to track, and let's say the condition is set to property is set to event is disabled. Okay, so at this point I want to we'll say hide track. All right, so I think we may have to couple this with, because within the project logical editor, you could assign a macro. So I think we've done this before. We go to our key commands, and I just made a macro of one particular, so of hide selected tracks. So if you go to channel and track visibility, so it seems counterintuitive, but to do this, but now once I define and I select all the tracks here, so I'm going to say function select, and we're going to say if the track is disabled, it's going to select those. And then I'm going to have it trigger a macro for, and we'll have this under hide selected tracks. So, and that's just that one particular function again. When you go to your key commands so we'll come to hide selected tracks, and it's just a channel and track visibility agent hide selected channel. So I'm going to select the tracks and then hide the selected track. So let's say I have this selected, and now everything else is going to be set where, you know, the tracks are still there. They're just hidden from you. So to do that again, so like my audio track is disabled. This instrument, Retrolog 1 isn't. Retrolog 2 and 3 are disabled. So I'm going to basically select all the tracks are disabled and afterwards trigger the macro of that function. And that's all you have to do. So to see a question from Tanmay, it's great to see you on the live stream again. Can we audition sounds while going through presets in Backbone or Hallion? So yeah, so let's come over here and let's just say, let's do Hallion first. I think it's the same principle. So let's say I have this particular sound and I'll just kind of load that up. And if I click here, so I have, so, and now I could select a different, and then all you have to do is just kind of come here. So that's right. You kind of, all you have to do is just kind of come over here and open up the little independent file browser. And then you could just, you know, go through these and be able to kind of audition. And I think you might be able to even do it from the media bay. So let's say if we come over here to our media, let's just go back and let's go to VST instruments. Let's go to drum and say Backbone. That now, and I could just select here and say, okay, I like that. So now I could double click, add the instrument with that particular sound, load it up right there. So that's really all you had to do. And you could do the same for Hallion as well. Let's see, can you use a USB jog wheel with Cubase like a video editor would? If so, how would you set it up and jogger scrub through timeline without hear the audio while scrubbing? Okay, so yeah, if you wanted to do that, it's really just going to be, you know, you could choose to, you know, there's going to be, let's just find the key commands here. So a lot of those, like there's a little Contour Pro shuttle, and I think I did like some of the profiles for it years ago. But if we come over here to key commands, and I think you'll see it under transport. You know, you could just choose to, and as you go to different stages of the shuttle, you could choose to just come over here and, you know, jog left, jog right. So if you wanted to have, you know, you could jog that way. If you wanted to scrub, you could also choose nudge, and there's going to be shuttle play. So if you wanted to, you know, play half speed, quarter speed, eighth speed. So if you wanted to hear it or not hear it, you could just configure those to trigger different key commands. All right, so we have a question from Tanmay. Can you show where the user content track presets instrument are located in Finder so I can add them to my favorites? Okay. So let's come over here. Let's say I have a Retrolog track. All right. right, so let's say I just will change a couple presets here. All right, so I will come over here and we'll save preset. So all right, so now we've saved that as our preset. We'll jump back over here. So let's go to user presets, VST instruments, and so we can say reveal in Finder. So we're going to see. So you could access your kind of your user presets pretty easily, right just from there. So if you just go to, your user presets and VST instruments, but let's say we'll reveal it in Finder and we'll find the path. Okay, so just jump back here and say, let's go to your file browser. So I'm just going to go to my user account and to library, to audio, presets. And then we'll go to Retrolog here. And there you can see your preset. And at that point, I could add to favorites. So now I'll just go back here. Let's go to favorites and boom, right there. So that's how you could get that set up. Okay, reading through different. All right, just finding my place here real quick. Okay, so hi Greg, I run Cubase on both Mac and PC. I use Control plus mouse scroll to vertically zoom in and out, however the action is opposite for the direction of the scroll. Is there a way this can be standardized? So on the Mac platform, what you have to do, it's going to be based upon the preferences that you set up. So let's say if you go to your system preferences and go to mouse, so you could just toggle the scroll direction natural here, and that will be the basis for the Mac OS. You may be able to toggle it on your Windows platform depending which one you like. So it's just Cubase will kind of just follow the preferences that you have set in the operating system. So if you want to switch it, that's how you could do it. All right, so just see how many of you had Groove Agent crash problem on PC. Also, Halion SE3 crash. I guess Halion Sonic SE3. It's been a problem with me for 3+ years. I stopped using Groove Agent, got battery from NI. That's cool. So I haven't had any problems with either of those crashing. So I'm not sure if you tried to starting with maybe the program preferences disabled, but you could also, depending on some of the settings, depending how much memory you have. So let's say if we have Halion Sonic SE, and depending on, if you have low memory, you could actually adjust how much memory is being utilized by the particular instrument in both of those. So once you go to the options you could adjust the preload amount under the options for both of those, so that you could try to increase the preload options. But I've never had a crash in years with either of those plugins. But if you're kind of at the edge of memory, so that could cause a problem. Okay, we have a question. Is there any way to export different tracks which sent to different groups and effects tracks at the same time? So jump back to one of the projects we had set up. So let's say I have all of these. Let's say I'll take my drums here. So I will add I'll add 2 group tracks to it. Okay, so I'll go select these tracks. I'm going to send them to both groups here. And let's just add a reverb to the selected tracks here. Okay, so I'll just... Okay, so now... So I go to my sends here, and I want to send these all to group 1. So activate quick link. And let's send them all to group 2. Okay, so now we're having to go into our effects send and to our 2 groups. And let's say we'll just squash this for kind of like a parallel type compression. Okay, so now if I wanted to export, so we will export different tracks which are sent to different groups and effects tracks at the same time. So if I wanted to come over here, I could say, okay, let's take my audio mix down track. So I want to take the snare top, and once we do this, we could actually apply. If we wanted to do this, we could say, let's insert the full channel strip on all of my drum tracks. So if I wanted to do that for my snare, so I could come over here, let's, after export, let's we'll create an audio track. So I could add that as my cue. I now wanted this to be dry, so I'll add that to the cue, and I wanted this to, And let's go ahead and add something really goofy, like our, you know, a delay on the snare. So we'll add a 30-second note delay going through our bus. And now I just wanted it to export. I'll delete that, but let's say we want this to go to our groups and sends, but not through the master. So, you know, and so now I'll just say, let's just do a quick export here. We'll give it a minute. I should have just chosen a quick small region. So this will give us kind of the same processing or the same channel through different processing without any problem. So you have different effect settings that you could set directly there. All right, so now we'll have our snare. So we can see that we'll have kind of, so we hear the effect, dry, and now probably with the delay. So that way you could have those different processing options all without any issues. So you can definitely kind of run it through, you know, you could have, you know, with the batch export queues, you could have different scenarios set up quite easily. Okay, Michael Teams wants everyone to like, whack, whack, whack. So you could hit the like button. All right, great that Graham could join us from Royal Wooton Bassett. Okay, so we see kind of random quantize of selected MIDI notes, not all. Okay, so let's say if I had, and let me just get this set up so we can see it pretty easily. All right, so let's say if I wanted to, like I have 16th notes here, let's say quarter notes here, let's do triplets here. So let's say, and we want to do just kind of randomized. So I'm not sure if you wanted to randomly quantize or just, so if we are, you know, so say if we're in like so let's say we've entered in different rhythmic values and I only want to quantize the one particular pitch or apply randomness to only one particular pitch, you know, whatever is kind of, let's see if I will select only my hi-hats, which are 16th notes, and then, you know, if you wanted to go to I'm just going to reread a question, make sure I'm understanding it. Okay, random quantize of selected MIDI notes, only not all. So now if I just do whatever is selected and I apply, let's say, a quarter note triplet, it's only going to do those selected notes and not other notes. So if I wanted these to be quantized to half notes, it's only the selected that will be applied. So I'm not sure if that's what you want. If you could maybe specify a little bit, that'd be helpful. Okay, so we see a question from James Bond. What about MIDI export resolution as a question? So the reason that we have different resolutions when exporting MIDI files, so when we see this, we'll show it in the preferences here quickly. So you see an export resolution. So the MIDI resolution inside of Cubase is sample accurate. So it could be up to 192,000th of a second. But if you're exporting for a hardware sequencer, the hardware sequencer won't be able to make any sense of that resolution. So most hardware sequencers and keyboard workstations are only going to be working at 480 ppq. So if you're wanting to export the MIDI file to something like a piece of hardware to play it, that's why we have the scalable resolutions right there. Okay, so I see the link to for the Christian Sense. If I could take a look at it afterwards, I will. So if you want to send me just a quick email reminder, but I'll see what he's doing. Okay, we have a question. Hi, Greg. Question. Sometimes the track record button in the timeline turns back on by itself every time I turn it off. How can I turn that off again? So, okay, so it could be that, maybe you have punch in activated. Like if you accidentally hit the letter I, and, so it could be, when you do that and you cross, let's say we have our locators here and we cross the locators and I just kind of hit play and punch in is turned on. I'll just do this after the project here. So say, all right, we're going to play. And now it seems like we're just playing. We cross the left locator and now it's in record. And it could often, when I get this question, it's just because punch in is activated. So if that isn't activated, you can kind of hit stop and play without that going on. But if the punch in is activated, it will just go into record. So you can see the punch in icon here, but try hitting the letter I on your computer keyboard and that will probably take care of it for you. All right, so we see, when will Cubase be optimized for Apple M1 chips? So there's a lot of components, like third-party components, that aren't going to be probably functional on Apple M1 chips. So Cubase a lot of it is optimized already, but there's some components that just won't be rewritten. I think many VST2 plugins won't be working. So, they're working on Apple M1 chips, but there's, it's, as you can see from most audio companies, I don't think any real audio company is fully, maybe besides Apple, is fully optimized for the M1 chip, because there's a lot of stuff under the hood. It's not so easy to automatically, flip a switch, and there could be other changes coming that, may be kind of all for no reason, with other chips coming in the very near future. So it's kind of hard to do a lot of optimization, and some of this stuff isn't, so audio centric as well. But I know the team is working on always making it better, for all the different processors. So you see a comment from Ted Springman, Spectral Layers is like an X-ray of your music. Yeah, it's that's a good analogy for it, Ted. So. Okay, so we see how does pre and post insert work. All right, so let's say we'll take our bass here. Okay, so let's say we have
1, 2.
All right, so we'll just let me just. All right, I'll just revert the project here. Since I've okay, so let's say I had the fader up here. All right, so we could have this green line, which is adjustable on every single track independently. We can have, so let's say I have a compressor here and I have my gain kind of all the way up on the bass. So if we do kind of pre-fader, we can see kind of the gain structure. But let's move that same plugin to post-fader. And you can see kind of the volume difference there. So let's say, okay. So let's say I move the fader down. So this is post-fader. We can see the gain structure of that. But let's say I want to move it to pre-fader slot. And now we can see that the compressor is hitting the gain structure going into the compressor is going to be based upon not on the fader level, but on the channel there. But if I put it into a post fader slot, we'll see the gain structure going into the plugin be significantly diminished because of where the fader position is. So that's where the gain for the plugin is coming. And you could just simply, and you'll see kind of the blue and the orange colors just to differentiate. And one way to remember it, just alphabetically, B comes before O, so pre before post, you know. So that's how you could, you know, so that's kind of the difference between pre and post fader inserts. All right, wonderful that Pablo could join us. It's always better when Pablo's here. All right, so we have a question. I would love to know how to balance multiple audio tracks into one stereo track inside Cubase without using audio export. All right, so let's say I want to take a range of drums here. Okay, just a small range. So I want to take all of my drums, and this is another great use of render in place. I'm going to take all of my drum parts here. And I'll go to edit to render in place. Okay, and then I'm going to say, let's go to our render settings, and I'll say we're going to use channel settings. We could do this as one event, block events, separate events, and then I'm going to say mix down to one audio file. And we could mute the source tracks, and at this point, I'll just come right over here. Let's mute the source tracks. I'll come right over here. And actually, you don't even have to set the left-right locators. We'll just do 4 because it's going to be based on the length of the event. And now all of my drums are just automatically rendered to one stereo file. And you could use kind of whatever name you want. So that's how you could do it. So just select, go to render in place. And Just abort that. Sorry. So edit to render in place to the render settings. Make sure you have the channel settings. Once you have the channel settings as opposed to dry, then you can mix down to one audio file without having to go. And you could mix down, multiple, MIDI instrument tracks and audio tracks to one file kind of in the same way. All right, so in the questions, we're at about 2:35 p.m., so just so people know. All right, so I just see a question. What exactly the room is for, right lower corner. So I'm not sure if it's the control room. Maybe, let's see, the lower right-hand corner. So I'm not sure if it was in this view or another view. Maybe if you could ask again and maybe describe the window. If I'm in the right window area, you could let me know. All right. So one thing, if we could try, if you ask one question, if we could just try to refrain from, I should have mentioned this at the beginning. I don't think I did this time, but if we could try to refrain from asking the same question over and over again, that would be helpful. It just makes it faster for me to get through more questions. All right, so I just see just a comment on that just says vocals clarity mixing. So I assume that this might be for how to add clarity to vocals. Let's take a quick look. So let's try this project. It's a nice vocal part. That was okay. Guess all along I was so naive. So I just add now you're packing boxes ready to leave. So if we solo this, just a little bit of EQ. Laid out on the floor. I've got to choose what's mine and what's yours. So without any processing. Now you're asking Beatles or Stones. Something about that just sounds so first thing I would do is like go to the EQ and just do like a. We hear a lot of like low frequencies that could get in the way. So I'll just go to the pre section. Just leave it alone. And just kind of take those particular frequencies out. I was so naive. And then I could also just kind of come over here. Now you're packing boxes ready to leave. So you could just kind of. Our musical history. That's probably really harsh sounding. Let's go to channel strip just to kind of even things out a little bit. Just some light compression. Cause now you're asking Beatles and just a little bit of reverb I put in. Something about that just sounds so wrong. What is to it away? So if we take all that processing off. That you like. Please stop asking Beatles or Stones. Even though it's a great sound vocal, those like low frequencies can really be detrimental. Used to love when I played Hey Jude. So let's just add the reverb. So reverbs can brighten it up a little bit for clarity. Told you were out of tune. Whatever you did. Adding the EQ okay. And the low cut. Up until now. And the compressor. And we listen to that in context. Okay. I'll bypass it in context. So those are some things you could do to make your vocals have a little more clarity. All right, so we just see about automation. I just lost my spot, sorry. Okay, it says using the range tool for automation is a great tip. Can that also be used to get ramps and lock to bars or beats? So yeah, certainly. So let's take a quick look at what you could do. And it makes a lot of sense for doing kind of ramps for EDM stuff. So let's say, okay, I have this set down to the beat and I just wanted to do like every beat. So let's say I'll just switch my grid here and say, okay, I just want, and I'll just activate. So now I could just take that audio and let's come over here. Let's select the range. And if you want, you could just kind of go to the combined mode on these tools. So I'll select the range. Let's bring it down. And now you could just, you know, do that and do a ramp and have that ramp. It's automatically selected. And now if you just wanted to duplicate that, you could just hit like Control or Command D. So if you're doing like kind of filters, like synth filter sweeps and stuff like that, you could just do that quite easily. All right, so we see from Michael Teams, export files of 40 plus tracks seems to crash Cubase, giving a runtime fault of Cubase stopped working. Generally get through part of the export before it stops. Any ideas? So a lot of times that could be a particular plugin that's maybe not cooperating. So Michael, see if you actually like just try without any third-party plugins. I bet you could isolate it to a particular plugin, and then when it's trying to process that offline, that plugin could be causing some problems. Okay, so we have a question. Please give some tips to improve guitar EQs. So, you know, a couple things to kind of, you know, the guitar can be kind of an overwhelming frequency in the mix for anyone that's tried to mix, you know, keyboards with guitars, bass with guitars, drums with guitars, vocals with guitars. You know, those things can, you know, be problematic because it could take up a real, you know, a lot of kind of sonic you know, sonic room. So, you know, a lot of times what you want to do, and guitar players I found, and, you know, one of my best friends, you know, he will practice in his room and come up with a very full guitar sound. It has, you know, he's practicing by himself, and he will have a lot of low end, a lot of high end, and a lot of mids, and he's pushing it. And then when he goes to work in the context of a band, you know, his low end is clashing with me. His high end's clashing with like the snare and the hi-hats and the vocals, and then he doesn't really have much clarity. So sometimes you have to realize that, you know, one thing that I used to do is figure out that, you know, each instrument, you know, if we have our low frequencies, our mid range, and our high frequencies, each instrument has to kind of figure out where it fits in here. I mean, if you think of a drum kit, it's a perfect example. You have a bass drum, you have a snare, you have a hi-hat, you have toms that go in between. And it's the combination of those frequencies, you know, that kind of make that instrument. So a lot of times, you know, cutting frequencies on guitar. So let's say if I want to take this. So many people would have like lots of low end. And they may think that that sounds great when they're playing by themselves alone in a room, but in context with the band, you may just have to kind of carve out very specific frequencies. And if you know what song your key is in, one of the best things you could do in Cubase is when you go to the particular frequency, you can say, this song is in A flat. I could just come here and say, okay, we're going to go to G sharp, or A flat. You could type in either way. So say G sharp 2, and you could actually just come over here and adjust the frequency, based on the notes that you type in. Because a lot of times people may just EQ frequencies just randomly that don't have anything to do with the musicality and the harmonics that are present. So as you come over here, if you know what the key is, as you scroll along, you could actually just see the actual key, the note that's going on. Another great thing to do is just using kind of the frequency comparison function. So let's say I will come over here. I could EQ, I could select my guitar, and let's say I wanted to EQ it with the bass so that these two weren't fighting. So we can see kind of the frequency response of two different tracks. So if I wanted to EQ the guitar and switch over here to the bass, and then if you wanted to, you could actually just solo both sources and kind of just EQ, switch, and be able to kind of toggle between two different sources just by activating this kind of channel comparison mode. And that can make kind of a big difference in getting those two different parts that could be clashing and kind of resolving that all within one plugin window. Okay, so we have a question. I would need help with MIDI, please. When I open a MIDI event and double click on a note in the grid, there's some kind of vertical window coming out. Could you kindly tell me what it is? Okay. Okay, so when we go to double click on notes, so, one of the things that Cubase, I think it was in Cubase 6.5, would allow you to do is to double click, and depending on the instrument, so let's say if I had a Retrolog pad, all right, so let's say I have just, I'll do a quick pad sound here. Okay, so this works with VST 3.5 instruments, but what you could do is double click, and there's an option here where you could say, okay, I could double click and erase a note, or we could double click, depending on the status of this icon, we could double click and go into a particular note. And at this point, we could go to what we call note expression. So we could think, now I wanted to take the tuning of this low note here, and I just wanted to draw in. So I could just say, okay, let's switch to maybe my line tool. So I just wanted that to change pitch just on that one particular note without changing the other notes. And generally, MIDI, the vast majority of MIDI devices don't work this way. So now I could just take one note and we could actually see just the pitch bend or volume change, because generally, until MIDI 2.0, which really isn't being utilized by many companies, if you had a MIDI CC message, that MIDI CC message was for every note on a channel as opposed to individual. So that's why when you double click, this would allow you to kind of draw in individual, like more expressive MIDI on particular instruments that support that, and that's what you see those lines for. All right, so we have P-Zone. Great to see you on the live stream again from Gloucester in the UK. And we have Norman from Laytonsville. So great to see you, Norman. Glad you could join us for the live stream. Okay, reading through. All right, so we have from Brian Sawyer question: is there a way to copy a chord track to paste to another project? So let's take a look. Okay, so I'll just quickly, okay, so let's see if I just copy. I have those selected. Let's copy. Let's do new project. Let's add a chord track here. So yeah, you could actually copy and paste it. And another method, Brian, that may work is, let's say if I go to import track, let's say tracks from project, we might be able to do it this way as well. All right, just find a. All right, so you can see the chord track from the Beatles and Stones song, and we could import that with the events. And you could just import, so you could copy and paste or just do import tracks from project, and neither of those will get the chord track over for you. Okay, so we have from Tanmay, I have a Yamaha CLP 735 piano. How do I record audio from it to Cubase? So really, you would I'll just take a quick look at the particular device. But I imagine you could just take the audio out of it. Let me see if there's an audio out. So it's a Clavinova. Let's see if there's. Now I'm going to be. Yeah, so I see dual headphone out. So you should be able to just take the audio output of the Clavinova and, patch it directly into your audio interface without any problems. So, so if you don't have a traditional audio output, just take the headphone output and patch that into your audio interface. All right, so we have a question. Do you have any tips for speeding up multi-track drum editing? Okay. So let's take a look. So you can do it pretty fast inside of Cubase. So let's say if I have my multi-track drums and maybe we wanted these to get my keyboard set to, and let's say we solo our drums and we put on a click track and it's not quite as tight, especially on fills. So it's a little off rhythmically. So, I would put all the drums into a folder. Just double click and let's go to our hit points. And what you want to do is to just kind of find the rhythmically significant hit points, often for like kick, for maybe snare, probably. So let's adjust the threshold. So we don't want to include our other sources. So we don't want our snare to be catching every kick or hi-hat. And I'm going to go to my hi-hat here. Since in this piece, it's pretty rhythmically significant at the beginning. So I don't want like the kicks that are bleeding through. So now that I have kind of the hit points, the main hit points, and the concept of doing like multi-track drum editing is that as you do it, if we kind of cleaned up, the feel of one particular snare, that snare is still present in the kick mics, the overheads, the tom, and the hi-hat mic. So if we move the snare without moving the bleed through of the snare to other tracks, that gets to be problematic. So what we want to do is let's go ahead and listen to, let's say, our drums again with the click. So not dead on with the click, with the kick. And let's listen to fills. So it's a little behind. And there's a snare fill, looks like, coming up. All right, so the snare fill dragged. So what I want to do now is I'm going to treat these all kind of as one entity. I'm going to apply group editing. I will now come up to my quantize panel. And I'm going to open up the quantize settings. And we want to set a priority. So I can say, okay, my kick, I want to have the high priority. Let's say my snare, I want it to have kind of second highest priority. So we give it kind of a star rating. And I want to give it 3 stars for the hi-hat. I want to now come over here, and it's kind of placed markers across, hundreds of markers on each of the tracks. So we can think of thousands of markers based upon these priorities. So I'm going to click on slice, and now it's created slices across all of those. And at this point, I'm going to choose my quantize value. So I'm going to say 16th notes. And then I'm going to quantize. So this is now repositioned kind of all the slices. And at times you'll notice that if you zoom in, that there will be gaps because the event moved later or earlier and it creates a gap. So to make sure that we don't hear a bunch of clicks and pops at this point, we will just choose to crossfade. So now as we listen to the drums, they're going to be, significantly tighter rhythmically than what they were. So, and that's really kind of all you have to do to do just, quick, quantizing of your drums. So, and you could choose for this to do audio warp or percentage based, if you wanted to, and, whatever you do. So just do that pretty quickly and you'll be in great shape. So after you do it a couple times, you get the mechanics of the order. You'll find it to be fast and you can do it just a couple minutes. See from Michael Teams or someone else says, too bad it's not for Michael Teams driver, but too bad it's only possible to like the stream once. So that's good. So make sure you don't like it twice because then it takes your other like away. So, but hopefully it's helpful information. All right. And on the time, I'm at 3 hours and 5 minutes. Or at 3:05 p.m., so that's 2 hours and 5 minutes into the live stream. All right, and I just see, and this may be a further clarification to our question. It's always the same track that goes into record mode even when not selected. So I'm not sure what could be causing that, but check the punch in and punch out. And if that track, there are settings in Cubase where once you select a particular track, that so when you select a track, that it will become armed for record, and you could adjust those preferences by going to editing, project, and mix console. So you can make sure that enable record on selected MIDI tracks or enable record on selected audio tracks is disabled. And also I see just, so when I try to record another MIDI track, it records on both. So, something else, so try that preference, and that might just be doing it for you. All right, so I see just from Kevin, if he wants to do a team viewer or Zoom with me later today. So I'll probably be busy today, but maybe tomorrow afternoon I might have some time, Kevin, if you want to reach out. Probably after 1 p.m. Okay, so just reading a question. Is there a way to make a track's entire volume automation change with the fader? Example, the verse is 6 dB lower than the chorus. When I increase the fader level during the chorus, the difference is still 6 dB. Okay, so let's say I have, my bass part here. So to make the track's entire volume automation change with the fader. Okay, so let's say we have automation going on. Okay, so let's say I have that automation on and I think what you want to do is maybe trim automation. So I will come over to my automation panel. And we do this by hitting F6 as well. And I'm going to activate trim. And I'm just going to go to settings. Okay, so let's say we have this automation. Okay, and I'm just going to grab my fader here and let's automate. Okay, so I think what you want to do is to just kind of be able to take the automation here. So let's say as replying. And now as I move it up, all right, so once we've done that, and I'll just hide one quick I'll hide the waveform here so we can see this a little easier. So let's say, all right, so this is where our automation was and where I wrote. So I kind of took the existing automation, and when I raised the fader up, it's going to basically increase the contour of that. And now I could just say we want to, on leaving trim mode, now we're going to coalesce those two. So I click on trim, and now this is the new automation. What I did by just moving the fader 6 dB up, I can raise the existing automation contour up 6 dB. So try using trim automation mode. All right, so just finding my spot. Thanks for all the wonderful questions. Hope that everyone's learned something new. All right, so I see from P-Zone 36 World Clock, please. So this is, I'm currently at 3:22 p.m., so that is, I think for P-Zone in the UK, maybe 5:22. So we're 2 hours and 22 minutes into the live stream. So you could add that to you know, whatever start time it was wherever you were. So, all right. So we see a question, control room, how to use. All right, so the control room, we could think of it as the monitoring stage. So when people often are working with, you know, it's very typical for people to have powered studio speakers that have a volume control. And one of the dilemmas is if people will often use the master fader in their mix console here for the overall monitoring level. What the control room does is we could set this up using the audio connections. We use available inputs and outputs of your audio interface. And this will seem counterintuitive at first, but what you want to do is to just say, we're going to go to our outputs, and we have our stereo out defined but not connected. Otherwise, the control room could be, we could send a signal out of two destinations. Now, the control room is kind of our monitoring source where we could have different monitors. So if I have Yamaha or JBLs or Genelecs or some other monitor, we could just do this. Hang on just 1 second. My son is knocking. I'll be right back. Okay, I'm so sorry for the interruption. Just had to help my son with something. Right, so, so going back to our control room, we can see that, we don't want to necessarily use this as our control room volume. And I wanted to maybe, if I have more than one set of speakers, that we could switch between our different monitors. So as we wanted to come over here, we could say, okay, I just wanted to go and switch between, instead of having a piece of hardware coloring the sound between my Yamaha HS7s to my JBLs to Gen X to maybe an Auratone, and I wanted to be able to down mix and, listen to my track in stereo or mono. But you see that as I adjust my master volume, we see the gain being affected of our mix. But when I adjust the volume here of our control room, it doesn't affect the overall. This is just our monitoring level. We could choose to dim also. And then if we wanted to enable some additional functions, such as listen. So if I, instead of soloing tracks, I could come right over here and just click on listen, and that will dim the other tracks down instead of muting them. So I could hear this in context. And then we could also get into, each monitor has their own insert chain. We could have plugins here for room correction or metering. And you could set up multiple headphone mixes for different musicians through the control room. I just see a question. What is my hardware setup? So I'm running just a MacBook Pro. It's about 18 months old, and it's an i9 with 32 gigs of RAM. It says 2.9 gigahertz Intel Core i9, and I have a 2 terabyte SSD. One side's partitioned for Windows 10, and the other side's partitioned for Mac OS. All right. All right. So we have a question from John Costigan. Hi, Greg. What is the best way to make sure that every VSTI used in a song is present when I import tracks to my new master template? Cubase 10.53, Windows 10 PC. So, if you have plugins, if you just click on your VSTI window here, if it's not going to be... So say if we have this, and you'll notice that if you see in the VST instrument rack, and you can do this also by hitting F11, you could see if all of the different instruments are loaded. So if one wasn't loaded, it would probably say missing or no VST instrument, something here. That's when I would start to look. So I would just kind of look right there and make sure it all looks kind of as expected, and you could collapse these to see more instruments all at once. You see Sable Winter still likes the Beatles or Stones. Yeah, so look up Vince Melamed. He's the writer of it, and he's a great guy. So wonderful writer and musician. All right, so to see having issues with graphic crashes, finding Cubase 11 quite buggy generally, using NVIDIA drivers or Windows own graphic drivers doesn't seem to make any difference. Any ideas? So there's a lot of times when adding kind of the gaming layer for NVIDIA is generally bad for any DAW. So if you try just to install just the core components of the video driver, without any of the gaming stuff. So, and often it may seem counterintuitive not to have the extra fancy gaming stuff, because that's taking away from the processing, that's interrupting the processing that a DAW needs. So you want the processing to be very stable and kind of a known entity. So having kind of the gaming mode on the graphics drivers can cause a lot of issues that you're running into. And I see from Graham Witcher, he's just mentioning that he had the same problems when he upgraded to Cubase Pro 11. What I did was disable my NVIDIA graphics setting and only use the internal CPU for graphics, and it seemed to do the trick for him. All right, so we see from Emmanuel, thanks for the explanation, Greg, and thank you guys for providing related tips here in the chat. Congratulations for this wonderful initiative of sharing the knowledge. And this is from Emmanuel from Bucharest. So, yeah, I think it's a wonderful format, and I think it's a great community, and I look forward to doing these twice a week and getting to help people out. And I learn stuff all the time in these live streams as well. So are any of the compressors that come with Cubase 11 Pro styled in Pultec classic compressor? I thought the Pultec was more of an EQ, but so, if you go to like the vintage compressor or tube compressor, they're not specifically modeled after a particular model, but kind of more of the genre, but definitely kind of play with those. And my blind mastering engineer friend, who has probably the best ears of anyone that I've ever met, is just ridiculous. The tube compressor, when he started playing with that kind of blew him away. But if you're also looking for other kind of more vintage dynamics controls, between these two, that will get you just about anywhere that you really want to go with that. So play with those, Tim. All right, just trying to find my spot. Okay, question. Could you discuss the project folder icon that appears on the hub? Is it static or can be used to switch folders? All right, so let's do a new project. All right, so let's make sure I have the right... Okay, so discuss the project folder icon that appears in the hub. Is it static or can it be used to switch folders? So if you come, so there's this particular project folder. So this can go to a default location, but you could also prompt for a project file location. And then when you choose what you want to do, at the next stage, this would allow you to choose the folder that the project is going to be stored to. All right, so we see Forrest Nielsen's. He was from Salt Lake City, so great to have you on the live stream. All right, so we see from Tanmay's question, Michael Teams about recording his clavinovas. Yamaha says I patched it with 1/4-inch adapter to instrument input of interface, but can't see the option within Cubase to record. So really, all you had to do is just add a stereo audio track. So let's say and if you have a so let's say you want to add a stereo track, and at this point, wherever your inputs are defined, and you may have a switch to switch between instrument or microphone, it may just automatically switch based on sensing of the input. But if you go to your VST connections, and just go to your inputs, we could add, let's say at this point I want to add a bus, and we'll make it a stereo input. So at that stage, we'll have our stereo in. So we go to your audio track and set its input to the stereo in, and then you should be able to record without any problems. Okay, so we have a question from Ted Springman. When choosing an individual drum audio track to quantize to, usually you pick kick, but why can't I just record the click to audio and use that and use the recorded click audio to quantize to? So you could, but it's not really necessary because the program knows where the grid is. So we don't necessarily need a particular audio file to indicate where the grid is, because the program is aware of where the beats fall. So you could do it, but I think it's kind of a very left-handed approach to do it. I guess no offense to left-handed people, but it's kind of an unnecessary approach in treating that. Okay, so I see if Tamay wants to do two separate audio mono tracks instead of a stereo track. So just come over here and make sure that you have mono in 1 set for, let's say, input 1 of your interface, mono in 2 to input 2. Let's add 2 mono tracks. So we're going to add 2 tracks. You make it mono. And now at this point, you could set mono in 1 and mono in 2. So let's say we will now call this our clavinova left, clavinova right. And I could place both tracks into record, play the MIDI to it, or record the audio, just play the instrument. And once that they are recorded, if you wanted to group these together, just hit Control or Command plus G, and now when you move one, they'll always move together. So I don't know what you could do a stereo track, and that would keep everything together as well, but you could do 2 mono tracks, whatever makes sense for your particular workflow. All right, so we see Theodore from London. Glad that you could join. I think he's missed it the last couple times. I've seen his comments on the comments field after. So we're glad that you were able to make it live. Thanks for joining us. All right, so Michael Pierce got his Cubase 11. All right. All right, and he's just says slap the button if you think Greg should be getting commission. So I'm just happy to get I'm always just happy to have a job doing stuff I love. So, but thank you. See Zofo mentioning you just watched an interesting documentary on Netflix about auto-tune. So yeah, you should. A good one I liked was on Score. I'm not sure if it's on Netflix, but there's a bunch of film composers, lots of Cubase goodness on that. All right, so we had a question, and this was kind of mailed in advance. I don't know if you tackled ID3 tags. If not, could you show us how to edit ID3 tags in Cubase 11? One of the genre I've written a song on isn't there. How do I add it to there? So, I did some research on this before, so when we do our export audio mix down, and if we go to MP3 here, we could choose to edit the ID3 tag, and there's a number of different genres, and these genres listed, are kind of a standard set of genres for MP3. So if it's customized, there's a good chance that many the metadata for a custom MP3 tag won't be read by and won't be sorted by different services. So you could probably, create your own, but there's a really good chance that it won't be recognized by, and this is kind of the list, I believe, from Fraunhofer, who basically invented MP3. So I think that's why they don't, many things you can customize, but some things you can customize, and then if it kind of works against you, so I think that's why they don't allow the MP3 genre tags to be customized, because they don't want it to not be recognized by just about all of the playback systems. So, and if you could let me know like what particular, if you want to email me, Theodore, or just what the genre tag is, I'd be happy to kind of pass it along. Okay, so we see a newbie question. How do you fade up? So you could do fade ins quite easily. So let's say if I just wanted to take some different devices here, so I'll just crop this just to show it. Okay, so let's say if I'm here, if we just grab like the beginning of a clip, we could just do a fade in. So I think that's what you want by a fade up. If you wanted to do it in the middle of a section, you could just select a particular range, go to audio processes and fade in. And then you can just have that kind of automatically just fade in just like that. And if we remove that, you can see it's going to be kind of the same amplitude. All right. So I just see from PZone36, you can run Windows 10 on a MacBook. So yeah, you can. Since Apple had migrated to the Windows platform, so I could run it in Boot Camp. There's also another technology called Parallel, so I could basically hold down the Option key and run my computer as Windows or run it as Mac. So, but I don't think it's going to work that way. Maybe for the M1 chip, it's kind of disappointing. Okay, so we see from Ted Springman, just clarifying a question from the other day, how best I could double vocal to a similar but not exact copy of the main vocal without having the vocalist re-record the part again. So if you want to do, you know, I would maybe just do like a little bit of processing on it. You know, I've seen some people, it's just... All right, I'll just revert this quickly. We'll play this for Sable since it's her favorite song. All right, so let's say... So say, okay, we'll duplicate the track. That was okay. And maybe like on this track, an insert that I would maybe do. Or if you wanted to make it sound, like even without duplicating, if you want it to be kind of doubled, you can really check out... see what's the plugin I'm thinking of here. Yeah, check out Cloner. So say we'll just... So, you know, if you wanted to just, so you could kind of humanize some different things, but just check out. So let's say we just... So you can say, okay, I just want it to be two voices. And just automate. You know, so I would check out, you know, if you're looking for like a doubled sound in different spots, like in a chorus, you know, definitely check out like the Cloner plugin. There's lots of great stuff in there to work with for kind of thickening up vocals or background vocals. Yeah, so I see Michael Teams just to Ted Springman is, you know, a lot of times people record different microphones and different microphone placements and like two different microphones at once. And I see Pablo's using, also he's mentioning he uses Cloner as well. Going through some more. All right, so I think I might be towards the end of the questions submitted, but I'm going to go ahead and move over. I'm going to move over to some of the questions that were submitted in advance here. So let me just jump back. So I know we had questions. Okay, so we had a question. Let me just jump to our project. I had some stuff prepared with. Okay, so we had a question that I received over Facebook. How to nudge the cursor based on the grid using key commands. Okay, so many times we can move the events just by nudging. So if I hold down like Control or Command and select the event, I could nudge it by our grid value here. So I can move it by bar or by beat. And the question was how to move the playhead position in the same manner. So, and we could do this by, and I think if we just go to the key commands, we could find this. And it's going to be under nudge, or I think maybe under the transport of nudge cursor left and nudge cursor right. And I think these are the default keyboard shortcuts, which is the control or command plus on a numeric keypad, the plus minus. So plus minus is fast forward, rewind on a numeric keypad. So if I wanted to, let's say, go to the beginning and now I wanted to nudge by beat, I could just hold down Control and move the cursor just kind of like that. So I can nudge by beat. Or we could choose to nudge, backwards or forwards. Or if we choose this to be bar, so whatever our value, our grid is set to, we could just choose to, move your playhead position accordingly. So, you could just, Control or Command plus the plus and minus on a numeric keypad. So if I switch this grid to seconds, I could now just come right over here and nudge it by second or move it this way. So this will tie into kind of the master time question. Okay, so we have a question that was sent in. When I am in the mix console, I would like to have the same shortcuts to switch between visibilities that I use in the window project. Is it possible to have the window project and mix console configuration synced? Thanks. Okay, so let's say I have a number of audio tracks here. Let's say they're visible. So let's say I have audio tracks 1 through 12, and I've hidden tracks 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. So we don't see those here. And when we go into our mix console, so this would be reflected here. But if we go to our main mix console, we may not see these be reflected. But you see this little arrow here. So now these two little lines, and this will sync the visibility between the project window and our mix console. So without that synced, we could see all of the channels. So if I just wanted to come here, we could show all channels. So when I go to, I have my even number tracks hidden. I hit F3 and all my hidden tracks are now showing up here. So what you want to do is just to sync the project and mix console, and this will sync the visibility. So now when I go to my large mix console, all of my even channels are hidden. So this way you could synchronize without having to between the track visibility and the channel visibility. And if you wanted to do it on mix console 2 or mix console 3 instead, you have that option. So just right here, just make sure that you have that turned on, and those will be synchronized. Okay, so we have a question. So back in 2010, you showed what you called clever routing in Cubase 6, entitled "Turn Virtual Instruments into Audio in Cubase." The video is the only one to help me unscramble the puzzle to create separate instrument tracks from BFD to recently upgraded Cubase 11 Pro, Win 10, Tascam US 1800 interface. I need a bit of help again with the turn virtual or phantom outputs routing to audio tracks from VSTs and Cubase 11. Thanks. I love the Cubase live format, Don M. All right, so if I have I think I have a Groove Agent track here. And let's go ahead and open it up. And I have, let's say I have these. This may even be simpler now with some of the newer functions. Let's say we got this little groove going on. And right now everything is being routed to one particular output. And this would be kind of the same functionality if you're using other drum programs. So I'm going to set like my kick, hi-hat, snare, my room, and my overheads to separate outputs. So you may have to go with other instruments. If you go to Groove Agent or to BFD, you may have to click on Activate Outputs and set the outputs. In Groove Agent, I could say I want my kick going out of output 1 or output 2, and we see that now my kick is being added. My snare out of output 3, my hi-hat out of output 4. Let's say output 5 will be my overheads, and output 6, the room mics. Okay, so let's say I have my drum pattern here. And what I want to do is, let's say I drag that pattern onto my project window. So I have the MIDI and I want to turn these into, individual tracks so that, they could automatically be split up intelligently. So where the kick is on its own track. So now with the more contemporary versions, like from 6, it's before render in place was really added, I can select the events here. And I'm going to go to render in place from my edit menu. And I'll just go to my render settings. So I could include the channel settings. We could do this as one event. And I could choose to mute the source events or to keep them. So I have one track that's being sent to multiple outputs. And I'll just say render. And as we do this, it'll now... we'll listen to it and we'll have our kick. Hi-hat, your rooms, your overhead. So all those can just automatically be rendered to their individual files without having to record it in real time and route it through groups. You can still do that. It could be a more convoluted process. I think, Donna, you'll agree that this might be a little easier than previous versions of Cubase with that. All right, so we just had a question from Daryl Meldon from Oakland, who's on the live stream. Thanks for sending this in. My question is about the manuscript picture and music you use in your demonstrations on Club Cubase streaming. Are those scores from Dorico or another program such as Finale or Sibelius? So, usually everything I'm doing is just directly from within Cubase because Cubase has a very capable score editor already. So if I wanted to just, go to a particular track. We obviously do Dorico as a company and it's a wonderful notation program, but I could just, in Cubase, I could double click on a part and I could see it in kind of a graphic MIDI editor, or if I wanted to see it in my score editor, I could do that. So this is all of the functionality that's just a part of Cubase that I show. So unless I specifically go to Open Dorico, which I've done on several live streams, just when people ask about functionality. But, for the most part, I think everything that you've seen in the live streams is going to be, the internal Cubase scoring technology. Okay, and this is a question from Jan. When I use audio samples from MediaBay, it sometimes happens that the sample is not in key. It has always the right BPM because I make sure to put it in musical mode. What do I do wrong when the sample is not in key? What should I check when the wrong key occurs? So a lot of times when you're dealing with sample loops, you may not get the key. Sometimes people doing sample loops don't know what key it is in. And they may have different chords, and the key may not be so defined. So you may not have, let's take a look at maybe some sequel content. So a lot of times, when you may see some, here we'll have a number of different, let me just find a quick, like electric piano sound. So if you have MIDI, like this can be easy to kind of figure out, what the key is. But a lot of libraries don't have kind of an automatic way of determining what key it is. And it could be a chord, and that chord could fit into 12 different keys, really, at times. So let me just go back here and stop to preview. So if you take let's say an electric piano part, so sometimes what you may have to do is, like a C major chord that works in A minor, it works in C major. Those are very different tonalities, but musically the chord could still work. So the key could be, but if you wanted something to fit musically, so let's say if I wanted to come here, and I need this particular. So sometimes you could see what the key is when we drag over a file. So let's say, okay, I take this. But if you don't know what the key is, sometimes you may just have to listen to it in context and say, let's just put it in a quick loop here. So I'll just come here, get the right keyboard shortcut this time. And you might just have to listen to it and come over here and just choose to kind of manually transpose. So let's say now I want it to go up. So let's go up. So as soon as you kind of just, choose to transpose, you could manually transpose. And you may have to do that to get certain stuff to automatically fall in key. So the MIDI stuff is a lot more flexible than audio loops. And a lot of times, as people are doing loops, they may not, they may just have a chord, and that chord could work in 12 or, 50 different keys if you want to get technical about it. So you might just have to manually transpose and listen to it as you do it. I know it's not fun, but there isn't a way necessarily to say, oh, this is going to be the third chord, or is this the first chord, that, and Cubase doesn't necessarily know that. So I wish there was kind of a better answer for that, Jan. Okay. All right. And Taylor had asked last week about, let's see, before we get into this, about Flux. Let me see if there's any other last minute questions. Okay. Another quick question before we get into showing a little bit of Flux. How to make safe listening in control room from click and spikes. Do you have an idea to plug in chain for monitors in control room, brickwall limiter, other plugins you can suggest? What does people often use? So most people in the control room, if they have concerns about it, will go to the main section here, because this will go be processed through any of the plugins. Go to inserts. And the very last insert slot will just insert like a brick wall limiter if there's any concern. So if you just come right over here, just install a brick wall limiter, you could bring it down to, you know, minus 2 dB, minus 1 dB. And that way that could protect the system, but do it, you know, because you could have plugins on individual monitors. So if you have 4 different monitors, each monitor path could have its own set of plugins, but click on the main area and just run the brick wall limiter there for protection. Okay, so last week, Taylor Sapp had asked just like a quick run through, like an overview of Flux. So let's take a look at that. Let me jump back to our... Thanks again for all the wonderful questions. Hope that everyone's learned a new tip or trick. We will be doing our next live stream on Friday, starting at 1 p.m. U.S. Eastern. So we hope everyone can make it for that. Okay. So let's take a look at Flux. Now, Flux is a wavetable synthesizer. So what does that mean? It means it's going to take little bits of, we can think of it as taking little bits of wave files, audio files, and kind of breaking it down into little different segments. So when we look at it, let's take just a quick, like a very complex sound, and like a classic hardware synth that would do this. We could think of a PPG wave, or like a Korg wave station was kind of a popular version of that concept later on. All right, so when we do this, we're going to have 2 different tone generators, or 2 different oscillators on the main page. So if we wanted to turn on and off our different oscillators, plus we could have a sub oscillator and a noise floor. So when you come over here, we could activate our different oscillators. And if we wanted to choose kind of different waveforms, so I'll just we'll do one at a time here. So I'll adjust the level. So we'll take just kind of this particular sound, and we could just take our waveform, and you'll have different waveforms here. So let's say I want to take this and what that could do is now we could choose, okay, you want it to be in free phase or random phase, kind of like an analog synthesizer, or if you want it to be fixed phase, you could adjust kind of the position. You could pan it. If you wanted to adjust it an octave up or down, you could just kind of come here. So I'll just kind of start from scratch with this sound again. Okay, so we could have this blended with another layer, and let's go to like our sub. So we could have our different subtypes. If you want it like a sine wave versus a saw, and we could add a noise generator as well. So you could say I want white noise. So 2 oscillators plus a sub, and going into this is where you could pick the different wavetables. Now, as you start working with this, each of these could be run through your filter. So and then you have your filter envelope. You could have envelope 3 plus an LFO. We could have this be kind of a multi-oscillator, as well as kind of for the 2 different ones to get kind of a thicker sound. we have kind of your full modulation matrix where you could say, you know, this particular aspect will be changing the sound and modulating another source. You go to your voice, and this is where you could set up glides as well as like your pitch bend range, the amount of polyphony, how you want to do key follow. Once you go into the arpeggio, you know, you have multiple sources, kind of like a lot of the Steinberg arpeggios. So you can say, okay, I want this to be velocity, but maybe I wanted this source to be panning or position of the waveform. So we could just, you know, increase this. So let's say, let's go to 16, and I just wanted to increase and kind of change those particular tones. So you could have kind of your velocity, you could have 3 separate controllers to kind of change all of these sounds, and you could have different musical phrases if you wanted to. So, you know, very kind of ethereal, you know, harmonically complex sounds is kind of what's included with Flux. And this is, you know, one of the instruments that's just kind of included directly, you know, standard with Cubase that a lot of people kind of often overlook, but just really incredibly complex sounds. That's just hitting one note. And this would utilize more of the arpeggiator. So they'll give you kind of a quick rundown, you know, so think of it as, you know, 2 wavetable oscillators with your sub and noise generation, modulation matrix, kind of voicing, and your arpeggios. And, you know, with a lot of these instruments, you know, the best things to often do is just kind of start with a preset and start backward engineering it. And that's kind of a great place to be for that. All right, let's jump back to our live feed. Thanks again for all the questions that were mailed in. All right, let me find my spot. Okay. All right, so we see just a question from Christopher. I think this is with the Beatles or Stones. Is that a Mellotron flute, a Cubase plugin? So it's part of the Hallion instrument. So we'll show it to you real quick. And there's a Mellotron instrument that comes standard with Hallion. So activate this, and we'll show it to you. Kind of like one of the first early analog samplers.
Leave it alone. You still love when I played Hey Jude.
So this is the Halliotron. So it's not standard with Cubase, but if you get like Absolute or Hallion Sonic 3, that'll be kind of a standard instrument. So kind of all the classic Mellotron sounds are included, and of course playing back through the great Hallion engine. All right, so we just see from ESL Beats. Thank you, Cubase. Thanks to you, I managed to start into beat making. I started to make instruments. This software imperfect. I love it. Thank you very much. It's great. Thanks for letting us know. All right, wonderful to see Chase Bethia has joined us for the live stream. And he just added his like. So good. All right, we appreciate it, Chase. Great to have you on. All right. All right. All right. So let's see. Norm retracted his question. Maybe he got it answered. All right. So we see from Norton. Hi, Greg. I have some live recordings from years ago that had overcooked audio distortion. Any ideas how to fix or make it better? So let's take a quick look. So, there is a clip repair functionality inside of Spectral Layers. So on some stuff I've done where, it will, as audio is being clipped, that would probably be your best bet. Sometimes it's, one analogy I heard once was, it's hard to unburn your steak. But, if anything would be able to, I don't have an example to really show. Unfortunately, I can see if I could get one, but try the clip repair in Spectral Layers. And I think that was in Spectral Layers 7 as well. Hang on just one second. My son's knocking. All right. Apologize for the interruption. My son's movie was done. All right. All right, so we see Norm's question. Can I show all the parts when I turn on the scoring? So it's really whatever is selected. So let's say if I wanted to take my Mellotron piano, my choir, and a piano part here. So if I want to take these parts, I could select those 3 parts and go into the score editor. And now I could just see those 3 parts and see the notation kind of all created for those 3 parts kind of that easily. And you could take each one and, make it a grand staff if necessary. So whatever is selected is what is shown. See, Michael Teams has to get his control room up and running. So yeah, definitely. Once you do it, it's like, why didn't I just do this earlier? So. Just read through more comments and questions. All right, so I see Graham is saying we may reach 150 likes today, so hopefully it's helpful. All right, we see Jeff Zabelski has joined us. That's great. Wonderful to see you on the live stream. All right. All right. So we see Daryl's question. Is there a light version that comes with Cubase 11, or do I have to purchase it as standalone? I think this is Dorco. So there is a version that comes with that's freely available. It doesn't come with Cubase 11, but you could get Dorco SE, and that's like the starter edition. That'll allow you to do 2 different staves. So you could definitely kind of get started with that. So yeah, definitely, and I encourage anyone who does like any scoring work, getting the free version of Dorco to kind of, learn it and get around it is just a wonderful resource to have available. Okay, so see, Norton just got his Spectral Layers 8 last week, and he likes mentioning the time, so I'll try to do that. I figured out how to do it and rearrange some of my windows on my screen. I have lots of computer monitors up here. All right. And we see Jeff Zabelski just saying he loves Dorco elements. So let's see. I think I'm at the end of the questions. I think we got a lot of questions, and we have just maybe a couple minutes before we're at our 4-hour mark. But if there's no other questions, we could maybe wrap up just a little early if necessary. So once again, we will be doing the next live stream on, starting Friday at 1 p.m. U.S. Eastern, so same time. If you have questions that you want to submit in advance, feel free to submit any of the questions by emailing me at clubcubase@steinberg.de. So, all right. So we see Michael Teams just saying he'll have to get with me to get his control room set up. So, yeah, I'll be glad to help you, Michael. Just reach out. We see Michael Pierce is like talking about his hardware, but he's going to get some more. He's an EMT 140 was his most silly purchase. I'll just sit here and envy of you. So yeah, I was at Paul Reed Smith, of Paul Reed Smith guitars. Paul, he has the plate reverbs that were used in, I think it's Sun Studios for all the Elvis records and all the Bob Dylan records. So he calls it Elvis and Bob in his studio. So all right, we'll see if there's no more questions. We will go ahead and get wrapped up. We'll just do a couple minutes early. I want to thank everyone for all the wonderful questions. I hope it was useful. And with that, I guess we'll go ahead and wrap up. And I want to thank everyone for all the great questions. And we will see everyone next. I guess we'll see everyone on Friday. Thank you very much. Goodbye.